You're listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com.
Thanks for joining us here at Napa Broadcasting. Every city struggles to define itself. Sometimes it's through its natural resources, sometimes it's people and its leaders, sometimes by the way it handles crisis or tough times, and sometimes it's just not clear whether there are divergent opinions within the city as to what and who is shaping its destiny. Some 18 years ago, then Mayor Ed Henderson talked about wanting Napa to be a world-class city. Arguably, that has happened. But what now? In many ways, that will be the key question facing the next mayor of the city of Napa. After 16 years of Mayor Jill Teckle's stewardship, Napa may begin a new era with the upcoming mayoral election. The first person to throw his hat in the proverbial ring is Napa City Councilman Scott Sedgley. It is my pleasure, as always, to welcome Scott Sedgley to Napa Broadcasting. Scott, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Jeff. Always excited the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Well, it's always great to have you here. Throwing your hat in the ring, we'll come to that. But why did you decide to do it so early? You know, we joke a lot, and I'm sure you do too in conversations, how, the 2020 presidential election is already in full steam. 18,000 candidates have announced. We don't usually think of it that way in terms of local elections.
I agree with you, and I believe it was after the November election when we were joined by Mary LaRose and Liz Lesio on council. So we had two new council members. We had one council member that was only 2 years into her first term, so we had a relatively new council. And so I talked to Mayor Jill Teckle about the 2020 campaign, what were her interests, and what would mine be. And so through those discussions early on after the campaign, she confided in me that it's time for me to retire. I think, Scott, you're in a good position. You've been in town for a long, long time. You understand the issues. You're respected. You listen. You do what you believe is in the best interest. And so she encouraged me to announce with her full support. I did a little short exploratory. I talked to some other leaders in the community.
Scott Sedgley's listening to her.
Yes, and so I decided it was a good time to let it known that I'm up for the job, and that's what my hope is.
Which also means that you're going to be out there campaigning for a year and a half, essentially.
Please no. I mean, when we announced that, there was a lot of flurry and, phone calls and emails and social media. We see a lot of that. People, when I'm on the street, they say, Mr. Mayor. And so they give me, and I said, well, hold off, Rat. Let's not count our chickens just yet. But I'm hopeful this will die off a little bit during the spring and the summer. And then the campaign should begin towards the end of the year, the first of next year, to really step it up.
Talk about social media as you see it. How important is it? How much time do you spend on it? Does it give you any insight into what's going on in the community?
It does. I get on the Register Facebook page now where the comments are to look at people's reactions to, positions, policies, ordinances we do to see the feedback. I listen to your show regularly to get that pulse. I'm of a generation that's not the best in social media, so I'm having help in that department. But I think most definitely it is where our millennials, my children, they look at Twitter, they look at those things more than Facebook. But it's reality. You have to be out there.
How important is that in terms of, and you talk about the millennials, there are less and less of them, it seems, here in Napa, and we all have seen the numbers. I mean, you know all too well, having been on the school district for so long on the board, that enrollment is declining, the number of young people here is declining, the number of seniors here continues to go up constantly. Talk about how you see that. I mean, that is arguably a problem.
It's a bit cyclical. We've seen enrollments climb and then drop off when we closed certain schools in the district. When Shear School closed and it became a fitness center, and then it reopened as New Tech. D.T. Davis closed, and we've closed a few urban schools, the Capel Valleys, the Woodin Valleys. So I'm hoping it's a bit cyclical, and it's not a downward spiral. That's always possible as the demographic changes and it becomes just unaffordable to live here with a family. American Canyon's school district continues to be stable because they have the demographic and the young families down there. Plus, we attract students from Solano County. We have seats available, so you can do intra-districts. And so we have that good fortune that maybe students in other school districts want to come to our district. So I think the outreach, we have to do a better, continue to do a good job to attract new students, even if they aren't living here full time, but they're willing to commute. And then that's another dilemma, because now you have students commuting in, right. Which...
Let's talk about the demographics for a minute, because let's assume that they don't change appreciably, that the population here continues to get older. It's not a place that young families can easily afford, and there are a lot of issues for young families. How does that impact what we do as a city and policy as a city as the population here gets older?
Well, that's a difficult question. Do we look at the old model and encourage? Well, we're trying to do more affordable housing, so that's one piece that's just monumental in its scope of what we can do. But if we can, have a different model, that new urban design. I know the Shevlin Ranch, those homes, the Napa pipe design, where those were going to be higher, tighter densities to for families to come in and be able to afford. That's one option, is to try to maintain that demographic. But if we can't, and it slips away, and now our schools are closing, they will be repurposed for, I guess, for other opportunities in our community.
But aside the schools, how do you think that it might affect policy in Napa and what the city does? I mean, if you're mayor, this trend continues for whatever reason. Obviously, you hope that affordable housing will help, and that right. There's other things that'll bring some families here. But let's assume that the demographics stay pretty much as they are. How does that affect what you think about in terms of the city and what the council thinks about in terms of public policy going forward?
Well, it'll impact your ability to employ people. So already we feel the pinch in the hospitality and a lot of restaurants and other things that they can't attract a stable workforce. So I think council policy will look at what other businesses can we attract that don't require that kind of workforce. It's market driven. So much of it is market driven, and the Amazon generation, our small retails now are, they're not feasible anymore for brick and mortar because of the Amazon, and so there's no simple solution to it. As it evolves, we have to adjust. And is it fewer city services in certain areas? Do we need to fund the youth sports complexes if we lose all our kids? We have a giant
just spending more money at the senior center.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we'd have to look at, because we have a Kennedy Park master plan that has all these great amenities for the younger generations. But if they're not here, it's going to be yoga classes and things for the different ones. But
it is something that certainly whoever the next mayor is certainly going to have to think about, and that the council. And you and I were talking before we went on the air, there are new members of the council. It's a younger council. I mean, they're going to have to be looking at this too.
Most definitely, in attracting the professional staff to help us with that. I'm a member on the regional planning committee with ABAG, so I get to attend those meetings and listen to it as a regional approach. I think that will help us. There's always been a resistance to be too participatory in a regional, MTC and all that money, because you lose a little local control when you get involved with these regional agencies. But it'll become more necessary as we move along. Transportation is a good example.
Right. I mean, the argument is, and I think personally correctly, that all the problems we face, or certainly most of the big ones, are all ones that have regional involvement and regional solutions potentially.
Yep. We're not an island to ourselves. We can't just say we're in Napa and we have this beautiful ag preserve, and that's the way it's going to remain forevermore. We're going to have to look at it regionally.
What do you think the biggest problem the city faces is? As you go out there and you start campaigning, and maybe not full steam right now, but come 6 months from now, as you get out there, what do you think that people are going to want to hear about? What are you prepared to talk most about? Because you think it's the question you're most going to be asked.
It's housing. Right now, it's housing. How can my children? I have 2 children in town that are able to stay here so far, but friends that are my age with children and now grandchildren coming up, they're going to say, how is my family going to stay in the town I grew up in? How do we accommodate that? And so I believe the bottom is housing. How we look at housing, not everybody needs to live in a detached 3-2 with a 5,000 square foot lot. It just might change. And so that's the biggest challenge. And then NIMBYism, of course, when we propose certain projects, that is always a challenge, because everyone will say, well, of course I want affordable housing, and of course I want shelters for the homeless, but just not here, not in my neighborhood. And so that's always a challenge to try to balance that, to design the project and work out through all of the perceptions of what may happen to get that done. But housing's the biggest one. Jobs, livable wage jobs is a challenge. What kind of jobs can we provide our youth other than jobs in hospitality, the entry-level jobs in hospitality? They're the low-paying ones. Of course, there's careers in hospitality as you move up the ladder, but those are the issues that I see. How is my family going to stay in this community as they become adults?
Do you think that there are solutions to that?
We can't build our way out of it. We just can't. Governor Brown had said he wanted, 2.5 million houses by 2025. We don't have the workforce to build that many houses. So I don't think we can build our way out. We'll have to make, higher densities, infill projects to help. But I think because we're in such a beautiful place, not everybody can live here. So we're not going to be able to build our way out of it. But we do everything we can.
One of the things that you bring to it, and I think, in your comments just now about not being able to build our way out, and you bring a certain amount of realism. Part of it is being one of the grown-ups on the council. Part of it is having lived here so long and seen all of these changes take place and knowing what's possible and what's not. Talk a little bit about trying to impart that to voters, to people out there, that they have to be realistic, that they have to be practical. Too often, candidates run. People have sat in that very chair in here and we're going to build our way out. We're going to do this. We're going to fix all the traffic. We'll build all the houses, and it'll be great. And I don't even say that pejoratively, because I think that some of the people that say it are really sincere about it. They mean it. It's just not realistic.
When you start to look into it, into the nuts and bolts on everything involved to build, it's daunting. And I talk to developers quite often about we have this idea for a project, but because of this, and this, and this, the numbers just won't pencil, and so we're going to move on. For me, it's transportation, so we can get to the jobs in the Bay Area, and we can get home and not sit in traffic. That can keep some of our young professionals in this area. They might be willing to locate here if we had a good transportation system up and down. And I don't mean to bring BART into Napa County, because that won't happen. We don't have the population. But we can probably,
damn water in between messes it all up.
That's a big part of it.
Talk a little bit about what you see in terms of the council now and how it's doing, and a lot of turnover in staff in the city right now. Talk a little bit about that.
Again, because I worked for the city for 30 years, and so I would see these cycles where there would be kind of this void at the top. For sometimes it's just the perfect storm where you have retirements, you have key positions, and we had a city manager that I started council with, and I actually worked under while I was still working for the fire department. I thought Mike Parness did a great job. He was brought here to bring our finances in good control, and he did that. Mm-hmm. So when he decided to retire, that's always the most important job to fill. We did a great job with Steve Potter. I think he was a perfect person, and he's doing a great job at this time. Then we had a few other key positions that happened for a lot of different reasons. So we're rebuilding that executive team, and we're bringing in great people. And I'm optimistic we'll get the people in those positions that have the same passion that council does. I think all 5 council members now have a true passion for our community, and really want to. We're all there for really unselfish reasons. We're there just because we want to stay that we provide something, and that's why we're there. So yeah, it comes and goes, but we have a great growing staff, young staff in some departments, and we're still looking on a public works director, I believe. That position is not filled yet.
One of the things that you bring to this process is the fact that you are on the council now, and that you would be if you were to win, you'd be becoming mayor with a staff that you helped put in place, that because so many positions became vacant. As you say, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. It was just kind of a perfect storm, and you see this happen in a lot of organizations. It's nothing unusual, but you will have played a role or had a significant hand in bringing those people in. So it's going to be people that you've been part of putting together.
And that always, in my experience, works for the better, because everybody trusts as long as you don't violate that trust, and it goes both ways. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that opportunity. It's in the way it works. The council hires directly. We hire the manager, and we hire the legal counsel. That's who we hire, and we hire the clerk. Those are the only 3 positions that the city council directly hires. And then the city manager hires the department heads, which in turn hire. But we do have
have input.
We do have input, right? So if the manager wanted to bring in,
somebody that you thought was terrible, we won't have to name names here.
Right. So that's the trust level. We trust our city manager, Steve Potter, to bring in the right people. And we did get Vin Smith from the county. He was a county public works guy for the county of Napa, and we have hired him as our economic development director. He took Rick Tooker's spot. So we're really excited about recruiting, I'll say, Vin Smith from the county.
One of the other things that you bring to this is because you've been here for so long, you've been part of the community for so long, held so many different positions, is a deeper sense of what it's going to be like in terms of city-county cooperation. I know you have some strong thoughts about that as you've had over the years, and how to make that better.
You make it better by getting to know the people in other positions and trusting. Don't violate that trust. Understand. We have a common vision. I think with a relatively new board over there, we still have Diane Dillon and Brad, who've been there for quite some time. I think there's that interest in working together. After all, most of the county residents live in incorporated areas. So the county, they represent all that unincorporated, and obviously big charges in health and human services and all these other things. But basically the county and the city should all be one. The county needs to work for the cities, its municipalities, and the cities need to understand county's role. And I think that hopefully the egos are moving away, and we're just there at the table to solve issues and not create these little fiefdoms that don't get anything done.
Right. Talk about what you see as the role of a mayor in the city of Napa. It's an interesting thing. You were talking about the city manager and how important that is to the running of the city. I mean, in a way, the mayor is just another member of the council, but it's more than that. How do you see the role?
Well, you need to be a good leader, and that's through experience. So that's the first and foremost, is to be a good leader and lead by example. You have to listen. When I first learned and I watched how Mayor Teckel does it, she is generally the last one to speak on a public hearing when there's some, maybe it's a bit emotional or a controversial project. So we'll listen to the public. She takes notes. We listen. Then as the council starts to deliberate and debate, she's always the last one to weigh in, and often that can be seen as the swing vote if it's split. But the mayor has to listen. And I think the mayor's role is to accomplish things and not just try to lead some kind of a bully pulpit and say, I'm the mayor. The community has elected me as mayor, and so this is the way I see it. The mayor has to be the facilitator.
What about this, George H.W. Bush used to refer to it, the vision thing, in terms of having a vision for the city and trying to bring the public and the council along with you?
Well, most definitely, and one gets vision by interacting with the community. You know, what is, from all the different interest groups in our community, from the Chamber of Commerce to the Downtown Association to the school district. That's where a good leader, kind of assembles this vision. Here's what I feel the community they're passionate about. They see it as a way to be successful in a lot of areas, better for our standard of living. And so that's how you build that vision. I just can't pull it out of the air. I'm not that, I'm not that visionary that say this is the path we're going to take. So a good leader, a good mayor will attend everything, talk to our hosts on local radio and media, and learn. And then we it's a shared vision. It's just, I don't believe it's just one person's. You might have a few that come through in our world of history that were true visionaries on how they accomplish things. But at the local level on City Hall, it's a shared vision. It's what the community we do a climate survey, a City of Napa survey of the climate. What are the neighborhoods thinking of? Roads, potholes, sidewalks. Those were all things that were identified by our community. And it's government's role to address those.
And of course, the overlay to it all here that makes it so much more complicated is that it's tourism and visitors and locals, and the needs are not always the same. Sometimes they are, but not always.
And I'm asked that question often, and so I usually answer a question with a question. What do you see? What would you change so the city could have the operating revenue to do police and fire and parks and streets and sidewalks? Where does that revenue come from? Share with me, and we'll work on that. I talk to council members all around the state. We are blessed to have the industry that is in our valley now that support our essential services. So many other cities are struggling with that, and we are fortunate. I know it's not the city of my childhood, but Penny's and Woolworths, they're not coming back.
Brewster's is not coming back.
They're not coming back. So let's do it smart. Let's do it balanced. But when I came on council in 2012, the highest priority at that time in 2012 was economic viability. That was the push. We have to have a strong economy in the city of Napa to make this work. And now we have a strong economy, and it's based on our model of tourism. And I believe we do a pretty good job.
Of course, the danger to that always is, and not big danger, but short-term danger, and something that, has come up over and over again, and I think certainly all of the council members are very aware of it and have always been sensitive to it, is planning for that rainy day when it's 2008, 2009 again, and there's a recession or a drop in the economy, and we got to get through that.
And the tourism dollar is it's flexible money. It's not guaranteed. So if our tourism drops, we feel it. But we weathered a couple of significant events in earthquakes and fires, and our visitation remained strong. It did dip, and why it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we have a wonderful area to offer. And so people do come back in our proximity to the Bay Area. So, yeah, we prepared. We do have strong reserves. That was Mike Parness's, one of his priorities was to fund our reserves. So when that, and I hate to say when the next one occurs, but history shows they do.
Something will happen.
So we're in a good position. We in the past we didn't have to lay off. We didn't have to lay off workers. We had to cut back some services, but we survived it. And that's the goal.
And finally, talk a little bit about how you think you would enjoy the ceremonial role of being mayor, because there's a lot of the job that's about showing up and cutting ribbons and doing stuff like that. I
don't mind. I enjoy meeting and talking to people. I was invited to welcome a group of city clerks to your campus last week. So the mayor was in Washington, so I went out and welcomed them. And so I wish I was a better public speaker. I wish I was a more colorful public speaker to do that. But I'm just a retired firefighter, and so I work on that. But I don't mind it at all. I really don't when I'm walking down First Street and I have people approach me to talk, and that's good. I learned from my mother. I think I trust people. I like people. I'm not too cynical like some of my friends, but the one sitting across from me. But
right. We knew where that was going.
But so I think the ceremonial piece will be fine. My wife and I, we're here, and our kids are grown, and so I have the time, and I'd like to make her first lady.
Napa City Councilman Scott Sedgley, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Jeff. I enjoy it.
Thanks for listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com. Napa Valley Radio for the way we live now.